The station's alarm blared through the corridors, a shrill warning that no one had ever expected to hear. On the distant outskirts of human-colonized space, the Orion Research Station had been a beacon of peace, a place where humans and their allies studied the stars, seeking knowledge in the vast darkness. No one had anticipated that it would be the first target of an intergalactic war. Dr. Emily Ward, a brilliant but unassuming astrophysicist, was the first to realize something was wrong. She sat in the observation deck, staring at a strange, flickering signal from a nearby planet, when the station was suddenly rocked by a violent explosion. The lights flickered, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. Panic erupted as crew members scrambled, but it was too late. The Zinthar were here. They're attacking. A voice shouted over the intercom, crackling with static. Evacuate immediately. The Zinthar were ruthless, an ancient war-hardened species that had wiped out countless civilizations. With their superior technology and vast fleet, they'd long considered humanity little more than an insignificant blip on the galactic radar. But now they had come, and their objective was clear: eliminate humanity before they could rise to power. Dr. Ward didn't have time to think. The research station's main power core was on the brink of overload, threatening to take everyone with it. She sprinted through the narrow hallways, her heart pounding in her chest, but as she reached the escape pods, an explosion sent her sprawling to the floor. The station's outer hull had been breached. Above her, the stars twisted and distorted, as if mocking the sudden chaos of the situation. With trembling hands, she activated the emergency release on a nearby escape pod, sealing the door just as another blast shook the station. She could hear the cries of others, but there was no time to save everyone, only herself. As the pod launched into space, she watched through the viewport as the Orion Station, a symbol of human ambition, disintegrated in a burst of fire and debris. The Zinthar were thorough. No survivors. Dr. Ward's mind raced. This wasn't a random attack. They knew we were here, and they knew something we didn't. Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve hardened. She was alive, the last survivor. She couldn't just run. The message she had intercepted, the strange signal from that distant planet, was important. It wasn't just a warning. It was a key to understanding why the Zinthar had struck. Humanity was now in the fight for its very survival, and this tiny clue could be their way out. The galaxy would learn what it meant to challenge humanity. Dr. Emily Ward drifted alone in the cold silence of space, her escape pod carrying her farther from the ruins of the Orion Research Station and toward an uncertain future. The horror of watching the station crumble behind her was still fresh, but her mind remained focused on one thing: the strange signal she had intercepted before the attack. It wasn't just a random transmission. It was a cry for help, a coded message hidden within the noise. Whoever had sent it knew something about the Zinthar and their plans. Hours passed, and Emily's pod limped toward the nearest habitable world, a small colony known as Sora IV. She couldn't afford to waste time. With little more than basic supplies and her desperate need for answers, she worked frantically to decode the signal, all while grappling with the weight of what had just occurred. Her fingers danced over the pod's control panel, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The message was clear, but fragmented. Zinthar preparing. Resistance. One human force. The rest of the transmission was garbled, as though whoever had sent it had been in a hurry. Emily's pulse quickened as she pieced together the parts. There was something larger at play, something beyond the attack on the research station. The Zinthar were preparing for something massive, and humanity was the target. As her pod neared Sora IV's atmosphere, Emily contacted the colony. The voice on the other end crackled with static. "This is Dr. Emily Ward. I need to speak with someone in charge." Her words felt hollow, her voice a stark contrast to the chaos she'd just escaped. "My station was destroyed by the Zinthar. I need..." Before she could finish, the voice cut her off. "The Zinthar. We know. We've been tracking their movements for weeks. Hold your position. We're sending a team to bring you in." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Emily with a strange sense of unease. Who were they? And how did they know about the Zinthar before the attack? Minutes later, a sleek shuttle arrived to dock with her pod. The crew that emerged were not what Emily had expected, no formal military uniforms or government insignia. Instead, a small group of ragtag individuals stepped into her pod, led by a tall, grizzled man with a dark, stormy gaze. His appearance screamed of someone who had seen countless battles and lost a few along the way. "I'm Captain Jonar Kale," the man said, his voice low but commanding. "We've been monitoring Zinthar movements for months. We know what they're planning, and you're the key to stopping them." Emily blinked in shock. "What are you talking about? How do you know all this?" "It's a long story, Doc," he replied, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But for now, we're getting you to safety. The real fight is just beginning." As the shuttle zoomed toward the hidden base on Sora IV, Emily realized that humanity wasn't as alone as she had thought. There were others, other outcasts, rebels, and factions, who had been quietly fighting the Zinthar in the shadows. And now, they were ready to make their stand. Emily's mind raced as the shuttle descended toward the hidden base on Sora IV. Captain Jonar Kale sat across from her, watching her with calculating eyes. She still couldn't fully grasp what was happening. Who were these people? And how had they known so much about the Zinthar? Every moment of the journey felt like a blur as they approached a sprawling underground facility, built into the jagged cliffs of Sora IV's mountainous landscape. As the shuttle landed with a soft thud, Emily was led into the heart of the base, where she was introduced to a small but diverse group of resistance fighters. They were a mix of human and alien species, an eclectic alliance forged out of necessity. Emily quickly realized that this was no ordinary group of rebels. They were veterans of interstellar skirmishes, people who had fought for survival in the darkest corners of the galaxy. "I'm Kira," said a woman with silver tattoos running across her arms, her voice steady and calm. She looked human, but her eyes glowed with an ethereal blue light. "I'm a tech specialist. I've been hacking into Zinthar communications for the last few months. We knew they'd make their move, but we didn't expect them to attack so soon." Emily tried to digest the information. "So, you've been preparing for this. But why now? Why did they hit us at all?" Kira exchanged a glance with Jonar before answering. "The Zinthar were waiting for the right moment. We intercepted their plans. They've been building up for years, trying to wipe out humanity before you even have the chance to grow strong enough to challenge them. But what they didn't expect was that you'd fight back." Emily looked at Jonar, a new fire in her chest. "We won't just fight. We'll win." Jonar's eyes softened for a moment, but his expression quickly hardened. "That's what we're here for. But it's not going to be easy. The Zinthar don't give up. And now, they know you're not just prey. They've seen what humanity can do when cornered." Jonar led Emily through a war room deep in the heart of the facility. On a massive holo-table, maps of galactic systems flickered, showing the precise locations of Zinthar strongholds, patrol routes, and known fleet movements. It was a chilling sight, but also a glimmer of hope. "We've been gathering intel for months," Jonar said. "We've identified a weakness in the Zinthar's supply chain. Their entire fleet depends on a central station in the Zinthar homeworld's orbit. If we can strike there, we can disrupt their entire operation." Emily felt her heart race again. The target was within reach. For the first time since the attack on the Orion station, she could see a path forward. The resistance had the knowledge, the courage, and the strategy to hit the Zinthar where it hurt the most. The fight was no longer about survival. It was about taking control. "This is it," Emily said, standing straighter, her determination swelling. "This is where we make our stand." Jonar nodded. "Exactly. We've got one shot. We're counting on you, Dr. Ward." The hidden base on Sora IV hummed with activity, a quiet but determined energy pulsing through its walls. As Emily worked alongside the Resistance's most brilliant minds, she realized just how much humanity had to offer. In the midst of chaos, human ingenuity, adaptability, and courage had become their most potent weapons. But those weapons needed refinement, and time was running out. Jonarkel's plan was ambitious: disrupt the Xinthar's primary supply chain by striking their orbital station, Xinros, a fortress that housed critical resources and served as the linchpin of their war effort. If they could cripple Xinros, the entire Xinthar fleet would be thrown into disarray. But getting to the station wasn't going to be easy. The Xinthar had fortified it with layers of security, and their response time was lightning fast. Emily found herself deep in the heart of the base's strategy room, surrounded by glowing holomaps and tactical projections. Kira, the tech specialist, had been tirelessly hacking into Xinthar communications, mapping their defense grids, and finding weaknesses in their armor. The Resistance had come up with a risky plan, a high-risk, low-success maneuver involving a stolen Xinthar stealth ship and a daring infiltration team. "You'll be the one to carry the weapon," Jonar said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "The moment we make contact with Xinros, we'll need a miracle. That's where you come in." Emily stared at the prototype weapon in front of her. A device of unknown origin, reverse-engineered from the remnants of Xinthar tech. It was volatile, unstable, and untested, but it was humanity's best shot. The weapon had the potential to disable the entire station's power grid, rendering its defenses useless. But Emily knew the risks. It could just as easily wipe out the entire fleet, or worse, destroy everything in its proximity. "I don't know if this will work," she said, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts to remain steady. Jonar placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one does. But we got no choice. This is the only way." The plan was set into motion. The stealth ship, coded to slip past the outer defenses of Xinros undetected, would carry Emily and a small team to the station's main docking bay. Once inside, they would plant the device deep in the heart of the power core. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet would keep the Xinthar distracted, drawing their attention away from the team's infiltration. As they approached Xinros, the tension in the shuttle was palpable. The Resistance fighters, all seasoned veterans, were focused, knowing that the success of this mission could mean the difference between life and death. Emily's thoughts raced, her hands gripping the device tightly as the shuttle slowly neared the orbiting fortress. The weight of the moment hung over her like a thick, suffocating cloud. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was the turning point of humanity's war for survival. The stealth ship's engines hummed softly as they entered the Xinthar defense perimeter. On the holotable, Emily saw the flashing red dots indicating enemy patrols. Every move they made was under intense scrutiny. She could feel the Xinthar's watchful gaze. "Time to make history," Jonar said softly, his voice almost a whisper. And then, the ship's alarm blared. They had been detected. The alarm blared in the stealth ship, its shrill sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit, signaling that the Xinthar had detected them. The calm, calculated quiet of the mission shattered in an instant. Jonar's voice came over the comms, sharp and commanding. "Brace yourselves. We've been compromised." His eyes met Emily's in the dim glow of the cockpit, the weight of their shared responsibility palpable. "We'll make it. Trust the plan." But Emily wasn't sure she could. The Xinthar were efficient, ruthless. They didn't miss mistakes. She could hear their ships, their deadly pursuit, already closing in on them. Every second was critical now. The stealth ship, a marvel of human ingenuity, had been designed to evade detection, but even it had its limits. It could only stay hidden for so long. The ship lurched, a jolt of energy as the Xinthar fired on them. The hull shuddered under the impact, a sickening sound as metal screamed against the force of the blast. Emily's stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus. "Take evasive maneuvers," Kira shouted from the back of the shuttle, fingers flying across her controls. "I've got a hack on their systems. I can temporarily blind their sensors, but it'll only last a few minutes." Jonar nodded, eyes locked on the forward display, his hand steady on the controls. "That's all we need." He swerved the ship sharply, dodging another incoming blast. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had to stay focused. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was humanity's chance to strike back, to show the galaxy that they weren't as weak as the Zinthar thought. They couldn't afford failure. Ahead, the massive station Zinros loomed in the darkness of space, a cold, foreboding behemoth of metal and fire. The docking bay was just ahead, their entry point. But with the Zinthar closing in, the plan had shifted. They needed to get inside now. 5 minutes to docking bay. Jonar called out, his voice steely. "Prepare for the breach. Kira, I need that hack now." Kira's fingers flew across the console, and then, like a heartbeat, the flashing red dots indicating Zinthar ships began to flicker. "Done," she said, a small but triumphant grin on her face. "They can't see us for a moment. We're going in." The shuttle darted forward, barely avoiding a massive Zinthar fighter that passed dangerously close. Emily's breath caught in her throat as they made their final approach. She glanced at the weapon secured next to her. A crude yet potent device that could turn the tide of the war, if they could just get it close enough to the power core. They made it inside. The shuttle slid into the dark docking bay, the massive doors closing behind them with a low, grinding sound. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that every second they spent on the station made them more vulnerable. Jonar turned to her, his expression grim. "This is it. You and your team will plant the device. We'll cover you on the outside." Emily nodded, her pulse racing. "We'll be in and out before they can react. Just keep them distracted." The shuttle's hatch hissed open, and they spilled out into the belly of Zinros, the cold metal floor beneath their feet like a graveyard. They moved quickly, silently. Too much was riding on this. The facility's internal lights flickered ominously, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to mock their every step. They had no time to waste. Suddenly, the silence broke with a deafening crash. A Zinthar patrol had arrived, alerted by the blinding of their sensors. The clock was ticking. Jonar's voice crackled over the comms. "Hurry. They're coming." The sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridors of Zinros, and the air seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Emily's heart raced as her team moved swiftly through the shadowed halls, the Zinthar patrols dangerously close. Every corner they rounded, every step they took, felt like a countdown to their demise. They couldn't afford to be discovered. Not now. Jonar's voice crackled over the comms. "The Zinthar are closing in on the docking bay. You have minutes. No more. Get to the power core, plant the device, and get out. If the Zinthar find you, all is lost." Emily nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her. She focused on the task ahead, blocking out the fear, blocking out the noise. The device they carried was humanity's last hope, a weapon capable of rendering Zinthar technology useless. If they could trigger it deep inside the station's power core, it would send a surge of electromagnetic energy that could cripple the station, shutting down their fleet's operations for days. Enough time for the rest of the resistance to mount a full-scale counterattack. But if they failed... "Stay sharp," Emily whispered to her team. "We can't afford mistakes." The team moved in perfect sync, their every motion rehearsed and fluid, trained for moments like this. Kira, the tech specialist, led the way, guiding them through the darkened hallways. She had cracked the station's security codes, allowing them to bypass most of the station's internal defenses, but they couldn't expect that to last much longer. They were already deep within enemy territory. Emily glanced down at the device. It pulsed with a faint blue light, its internal circuitry humming with power. It was unstable, volatile, but it was their best shot. She could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest, as if the entire future of humanity was wrapped up in that tiny, fragile device. They'd reached the power core room. Its massive, segmented doors loomed in front of them, guarded by a pair of Zinthar sentries. Emily's breath caught in her throat. There was no way around them. They had no choice but to fight. Kira reached into her pack and pulled out a small humming device. "I can disable their systems for a few seconds, enough time for us to take them out," she murmured. "Get ready." Emily nodded and motioned for the team to spread out. In a flash, Kira activated the device, and the Zinthar sentries froze, their systems scrambling as the pulse of interference shot through the air. They barely had time to react. Emily and the others were already moving, weapons drawn. The first Zinthar went down with a muffled thud, and then another. They were fast, efficient, trained killers. But this time, they had the element of surprise. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as the last sentry collapsed to the floor. Kira was already at the power core, her fingers flying over the console to override the final security measures. "It's open. Emily, now's your chance." Emily rushed forward, placing the device into the core's access panel. Her hands trembled as she connected the wires, following the exact instructions Jonar had given her. "Device is in place," she said, her voice tight. The countdown was already ticking. They had no time left. "Get out. Now." Jonar barked over the comms. Without a second thought, Emily grabbed her weapon and sprinted back toward the entrance, her heart hammering in her chest. The sound of distant Zinthar patrols growing louder was a constant reminder of how little time they had left. They didn't know if the device would work, or if they'd even make it out alive. But one thing was certain. The tide was about to turn. The sound of alarms reverberated through Zinros, louder than ever. The device had been planted. Now the only thing that mattered was getting out alive. The seconds felt like hours as Emily and her team sprinted through the hallways, the heavy pounding of boots echoing behind them. "Move, move, move." Jonar's voice crackled through the comms, urging them on. "The Zinthar are closing in. You've got 10 minutes at best before they discover the breach." Emily's breath came in ragged gasps as she pushed herself harder, her legs burning with effort. The halls of the station stretched endlessly ahead, and the Zinthar patrols were everywhere. Their footsteps seemed to follow them like a shadow, and every time they turned a corner, there was the faintest sound. Someone, or something, just around the bend. They couldn't afford to be seen. Kira was ahead, scanning the security feeds on her portable device. "We're almost there," she whispered, eyes flicking over the flashing screens. "The outer docking bay is 2 levels below us. If we can make it to the elevator shaft, we should be able to get out without detection." Emily nodded, but the weight of the device on her back felt heavier with every passing second. They couldn't afford any more delays. They had no idea how long the Zinthar would be delayed by the device, and every minute they spent here was a minute closer to the moment it would trigger a massive, station-wide shutdown. But if they didn't get off the station before that happened, they wouldn't survive the blast radius. "Almost there," Jonar's voice said through her earpiece. "I've got the team standing by at the shuttle. They're ready to pull you out." Just as Emily's team rounded a corner, a Zinthar soldier appeared at the far end of the corridor, its dark eyes scanning the hallway. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was it. They had nowhere to hide. Instinctively, she dove into a side passage, dragging the others with her. The Zinthar soldier paused, looking directly at the spot where they had just been, its movements slow and methodical. The tension was unbearable. Emily's heart pounded in her ears, and she held her breath, praying the soldier hadn't seen them. The Zinthar moved closer, but then, without warning, Kira activated a small EMP pulse from her wrist device. The soldier's eyes flickered, and for a split second, it was as though the world had frozen. The soldier's systems malfunctioned, its movements jerky and unnatural. The pulse had disabled its tracking sensors, buying them just enough time to slip past undetected. "Nice work," Emily breathed, though her voice was low, tight with fear. "Now, let's move." They dashed toward the elevator shaft, Kira hacking the controls to bring it down. The seconds stretched, every noise amplified by the silence of their desperation. Finally, the elevator doors slid open, and they piled inside, the doors closing just as they heard the sound of Zinthar soldiers approaching from the other end of the hall. "Go," Emily said, eyes on the control panel. Kira punched in the override code, and the elevator began its descent. They were so close. Just as the elevator reached the docking bay level, Emily's comm buzzed. Jonar's voice was urgent. "Get to the shuttle now. We don't have much time. The countdown's almost up." The doors to the elevator slid open, and there, ahead of them, was their escape. A sleek, black shuttle with its engines already powered up and ready to launch. The team burst out, sprinting for the shuttle. But just as they were about to board, the station's loudspeaker boomed to life, its voice cold and commanding. "Intruders detected. All personnel evacuate immediately. Initiating lockdown." The countdown had begun. The shuttle's engines roared to life as Emily and her team scrambled aboard, the doors closing behind them with a heavy thud. The countdown to the station's lockdown echoed in their ears, a cold reminder that they had mere moments before the Zinthar would seal them inside Zinros. The team didn't waste a second. They were on the move, hurtling toward their last chance at survival. Jonar's voice came over the comms again, urgency threading his words. "Emily, we've got 15 seconds before the docking bay doors seal. Get us out of here now." The shuttle trembled as the outer doors of the station began to slide shut with a deafening screech. Emily's hands were steady as she gripped the controls. She could feel the sweat on her brow, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like never before. If they didn't leave now, they would be trapped forever, caught in the very heart of the Zinthar's fortress. The shuttle shot forward, its engines blasting full throttle, just as the docking bay doors began to close. The air was thick with the sound of their escape, the sheer power of their craft propelling them out into the blackness of space. But the Zinthar weren't far behind. Their fleet was already on alert, and they were coming fast. "Stealth mode," Kira called out, her fingers flying over the ship's console. "I'm engaging the cloaking system. We won't be able to stay invisible for long, but it'll give us a chance." Emily nodded, trusting Kira's expertise. The shuttle systems hummed as the cloaking field enveloped them, rendering them nearly invisible to the Zinthar sensors. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emily allowed herself to breathe, her body still tense, but slightly less heavy. "Lock onto our coordinates," Jonar commanded. "We've got to make a clean escape. I'm sending the signal to the fleet. We can't afford to be caught out here." The shuttle veered away from Zinros, hurtling toward open space, the Zinthar fleet on high alert, but unaware of their exact position. Emily's eyes flicked over the navigation systems, watching as the stars streaked by, the silence of space surrounding them. It felt like a dream, surreal and uncertain. Then, Kira's voice broke through the stillness. "The Zinthar are scanning, but they won't find us in time. The cloaking device is holding. But for how long?" Jonar's eyes were locked on the main screen. "We've got about 5 minutes before their reinforcements arrive. Emily, your device. Did it work?" Emily reached down and checked the status. The device was flashing, a steady rhythmic pulse. "It's working. Their systems are still in disarray. The blackout is spreading." The ship jolted, a blast of energy rippling through the hull. The Zinthar had discovered the disruption, and they were firing blind, hoping to hit something, anything. Emily's heart skipped, but she kept the shuttle steady. They were almost there. A few tense moments later, the silhouette of the Orion station appeared on the radar, a beacon of safety in the vastness of space. The Resistance fleet was waiting for them, its ships positioned in formation, ready for the next phase of their counterattack. Emily looked at her team. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow to the heart of the Zinthar war machine. They had given humanity a fighting chance. As the shuttle approached the Orion station, Jonar let out a quiet breath, a smile finally tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You did it, Dr. Ward. Humanity's reckoning has begun." The station loomed larger now, the fleet gathering strength in the distance. The Zenthar had been dealt a blow, but the war was far from over. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had seen the first flicker of humanity's true power, and it was unstoppable.